she was just gray, like just gray colored. And hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a story time on my labor and delivery video. So of course, with the labor and delivery story, there is going to be TMIs, some graphic details that I feel comfortable with sharing, and maybe something that might make you uncomfortable. So I'm just giving you guys a heads up. To start off, I'm going to let you guys know that I was in premature labor, I'm pretty sure. Premature labor at 32 weeks, and I was in the hospital for that for a couple days. They did stop the contractions that I had no clue I was having, but they stopped that. And so on November 12th of 2018, that was a Sunday, I woke up in the morning at 8 a.m. to go to the bathroom because of course when you're pregnant you have to pee like all the time. I woke up in the morning to go use the bathroom, and when I was standing up to put my underwear on, something like dropped out. This is a TMI if you guys want to know. Something dropped out and it ended up being my mucus plug. At that point I waited 2 hours just to see how my body was. I called my doctor 2 hours later, so this was about 10 o'clock, and she told me, okay, well, just come in and make sure you're recording all the cramping that you're having, because I was starting to cramp between those 2 hours, and it was excelling more. The pain was excelling more, and she told me to just go in just to make sure everything's okay and that you're better safe than sorry. So I took a quick shower because, you know, just in case I was in labor, I wanted to be all like clean for when I went in there, because I know when you have a baby, you can be in labor for a couple days or a day or two and not be able to shower. So I took a shower, I got ready, my fiance got ready, and we headed off to the hospital, and I was sent to the triage just to be monitored and all that. I got into the triage and I was in the middle bed. There's 3 beds, there's one here, I was on this one, and then there was one on this side, and there was another girl on the right side of me whose water actually broke. I thought that was funny. But they were monitoring the baby and my contractions, and my contractions at that point were, I think they were like 5 to 7 minutes apart by then. I'm not 100% sure, I don't remember a lot of that. But they checked me. When I first got there, they checked me. I was 1 centimeter dilated. About an hour and a half later, they rechecked me again, and I had progressed to 3 centimeters. And the nurse that was helping me and assisting me with all the stuff in the triage, she told me that if you were to excel in your dilation, you would officially be in active labor. So I was at 3 centimeters and I was officially in active labor. By 12:30, I was in my own room. Every couple hours they would check me just to make sure and see how far along I was progressing, and I was actually progressing really fast. So by 7 centimeters, I was asking them to give me this pain med that they put in the IV that makes you really sleepy. I don't remember what it's called, but I got that, and the reasoning for that was because I wanted to be able to sleep and relax before I had my baby, and that wasn't gonna happen because they'll tell you that the first dose is really strong, and every dose that they give you, your body will get more and more used to it. So it helped for the first dose, and then by the second dose I was actually ready to push. So I ended up not getting the epidural, and because of that, everything that I'm going to explain happened, and it was not a fun experience for me. I believe it was 10:30, I was 10 centimeters dilated and I was ready to push. This is where everything kind of takes a turn and gets scary for me. I took all my glasses when I was trying to sleep And when I was pushing, I was completely blind. I could not see anything. Everything was just blurry, you know, when you have not the 50-50 vision. So everything was completely blurry. About an hour into pushing, I was actually begging for a C-section because I knew that my daughter was actually facing forward where my belly was instead of facing the back, which is the proper birthing position. And because of that, she was not squeezing through the canal, my birth canal, properly. So I was begging for a C-section. I know a lot of women beg for saying that, oh, I can't do it, I can't do it, but I really could not do it. And unfortunately, they were like, no, you gotta keep pushing, just keep trying, keep trying. So I kept trying for another 3 hours, and just it wasn't happening. And I didn't want a C-section, but I knew I had to get one, so I just was like, okay, I think it's time for a C-section. And they brought me into the operating room, and they did all they needed to do. And so this kind of sucks for right now because it's affecting me right now, but when they sat me up to do the spinal tap to numb all the lower part of my body for the C-section, I'm pretty sure she was like right there in my birth canal, like right there. So when they sat me up, my tailbone wasn't going to stay there and she wasn't going to move, so I'm pretty sure that part right there broke my tailbone, because now I'm having issues with my tailbone and all that. I remember they put the catheter in and all that, and I just, of course you have to push because the contractions are wanting the baby to come out. So they're like, don't push, don't push. And when I was sat up on the spinal tap, I was like, I'm gonna push, I'm gonna push. And I pushed, and it's not a big deal, but I was numbed, and after that, all the pain that I was feeling went away, and it was like the best feeling I've ever felt. They were working on me, and at 2:50 a.m. my beautiful baby girl Raylan was born. And I'm so thankful for all the doctors, but I feel like there are certain things that could have gone differently. But my baby was born at 35 weeks and 2 days, so she was technically a preemie. She was born 7 pounds and 9 ounces, so she was a pretty big preemie baby. But she did come out, and my mom, I didn't get to see her till like 11 hours after I had her. She came out and she was not breathing, and I was just, you know, you wait for that cry, you wait for your baby to cry, and she just wasn't making any noise. And I was there, and me being the person I am, I try to make the best out of every situation, but in the back of my head I was scared beyond belief, because I was praying to God my baby would breathe and cry, and she wasn't breathing. Eventually they were doing everything they could to the baby, and she finally let out a couple cries, but she was still having issues breathing. My mom told me that when she saw the baby that she was just gray, like just gray colored. And my mom didn't tell me that until a couple months after I had her, because I know that probably would have freaked me out. She told me when I was on the operating table. But they had to rush her to the NICU, and my fiance was not in the room with me. My mom ended up going in the room with me because he has a messed up knee, and he was holding my leg up for the 4 hours of pushing, and I'm pretty sure he was probably terrified, and he thought he would see everything that was happening in the C-section, and everything just happened too quick at that time. So my mom was in the room with me, and my mom got to go over and take a picture of her, and that was the first time I saw my daughter was on a phone, a smartphone. And that, of course, so upsetting, because I wanted that natural birth, that skin to skin contact, to be able to breastfeed. And get that bond with your child that you would normally get the first hour that you have her. So at this point, all the nurses that were taking care of my daughter had rushed her to the NICU, and my fiance and my dad went and rushed with them, and they went to the NICU and they took a couple pictures, which is the picture that is in my thumbnail. She was hooked up to an IV, and then the oxygen, the little tube, the oxygen tube that goes in their mouth down their throat so they could manage their oxygen, I believe. And I was being stitched up at that time. I had no clue what was going on with my daughter. No one was telling me, so I was completely clueless. I was completely clueless at that point, and now that I look back at it, it's really upsetting to me because everything that I wanted, it didn't go the way I wanted. Everything I wanted it to be, it didn't turn out to be. So they were stitching me up, and if you have ever had a C-section, you know that takes a good 40 minutes to an hour to do. So I was in the operating room up until they got done with me stitching, up until they got done with the stitches. I then was brought into a recovery room, which is where you would stay for, I believe, the 2 hours. So I was in there from, I think, 3:30 until 5:30 or whatever. And then I was rolled across down the halls and then across the hospital to the postpartum ward that you would go to after you have the baby. And that was the hospital I was in. It was a pretty big room. It had like a little eating area, a separate eating area room, and then in my the regular main room, it was actually a queen size bed, so my fiance could sleep in the bed with me rather than sleeping on those really uncomfortable couches. And the beds aren't any better, but it was bigger and a little bit more comfortable than the hospital couches. So it was, at that time, I believe it was 6 o'clock when I was switched over to the bed, and so the thing that really upsets me, and there's a couple things that really upset me with the story and my experience, but the main thing that really upsets me is I'm pretty sure once I started feeling like my toes and all that, they could have put me, or I could have got up and sat in a wheelchair and they could have wheeled me down to the NICU to see my daughter for the first time. And instead of that, my fiance's mom and his grandma and him had to go ask someone if it was okay for me to go, and that was at 12 o'clock that day, 12 p.m. So I had her at 2:50 a.m. and I didn't see her until 12:30, 1 o'clock that day. So that's a long time not being able to see my daughter, and I'm like worried and no one's giving me answers, and it just pissed me off. But so I finally was able to go wheelchair down to the NICU. So because of everything that had happened the way it happened, I unfortunately did not get to breastfeed my daughter, and that was really heartbreaking to me because I wanted to give my daughter the liquid gold that everyone talked about was best for your baby, but I formula feed my baby and she is completely happy and healthy. If I would have gotten the epidural and not been stubborn the way I am, she would have been able to get her hands in there and flip my daughter to the position she needed to be in. And for those of you who had no epidural and had that hands in there, you know how that feels, and it is not a fun feeling. But I wish I could go back, if I could go back in time, the things I would change is I would get the epidural. I would speak up more than I spoke up when something wasn't right. I would have kept pursuing it and saying, this is what I need, stop what you're doing, give it to me, you have to give it to me. I just want to thank you guys for watching my video, and I will be back with another video hopefully by the end of this week. If not, then I will have it up next week. Click that button down below and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys next time.